So, welcome everybody. We have yet another podcast in our series of Feel Good, Do Good Work podcasts. And these are focused very much on engagement and well-being and are here on the back of our book, also of the same name, Feel Good, Do Good Work. So I'm delighted to be joined today by two senior leaders within Voltex UK Limited, a cash processing business based in Warrington, but with a number of locations around the UK, around about 2,000 employees. They actually took part in the best practice part of the Feel Good, Do Good Work book. So I'm joined today by Stefanie Wilson, who is Head of Diversity and Inclusion at Voltex, and also Sarah Magnier-Ashton, who is Senior CSR Engagement Manager at Voltex. So welcome to both of you and thank you for joining.
Thank you for having us.
Fabulous. So I just really wanted to pick up on some of the strands of conversations that we were having well over a year ago, just because aside from the pandemic this year, there have been so many other things that have been happening in the news and in society, in our communities. And I'm thinking just in the first instance about some of the discussions we had around your company ethos and culture. So, Stefanie, I know that since we spoke, you've moved into your role as Head of Diversity and Inclusion at Voltex. And we'd certainly talked about the honest and transparent culture that you have there, particularly, I think, with a focus on encouraging people to bring their true selves to work. So there's a zero tolerance policy, really, to cultural adversity, extremism, anything like that. Well, of course, since we spoke, the whole Black Lives Matter movement has risen to the fore. So I just wondered, really, given that, we know employees tend to be happy and contented when they feel their environment is safe. What's been the impact of this coming to the fore a few months ago?
Yeah, obviously with the terrible death of George Floyd that happened earlier on this year, there was the huge Black Lives Matter movement, and us at Voltex decided we have to make a stand with this, and we have to show that we have that, as you said, that zero tolerance approach to discrimination of any kind, not just racism, in all protected characteristics. But we wanted to show a stance with our Black colleagues as well, our BAME colleagues. So we started to do a lot in terms of Black History Month, particularly around forums for Black History Month. So we created an environment where all of our employees could come onto these forums, and we had senior leaders, we had members of the exec team on there, and that then provided employees with an opportunity to just talk about how they were feeling, how they felt when that happened, what they've been doing since, what they've noticed, maybe just some of those conversations that sometimes people feel a little bit uncomfortable to talk about. But actually, if we don't talk about the uncomfortable, how do we get to a point of having true inclusion? So we started to do that, and I think what we took from it, and Sarah was really great at helping to build these calls, was it was all about feedback. And we as an organisation can kind of tell our employees what we think they want to hear or what we think they want to know or want to do. But actually, we need to start to provide a voice and a platform for a voice for our employees, whereby they can tell us what they want. They could tell us how we can do better. So actually, that has really helped us to shape our whole diversity strategy of what we're going to do over the next year. So we have our headline of everyone counts, and we need to now take that feedback from our employees to make sure that that is continuously built into our company values and built into that strategy of what we need to do over this next year.
That's fabulous. And Sarah, what kinds of challenges, or what were the sort of I suppose, what were the things that you had to consider in creating the engagement around this?
I think there's always going to be, in a company where you haven't had these conversations before, some amount of trepidation around starting the conversation. I think for us, we've been very lucky in that we do tackle subjects that might be a little uncomfortable for people to talk about quite regularly, because we do understand that, you know, you have to have these conversations in order to make sure that we're doing the right thing. However, this has been a very difficult year for everybody, and I think to start talking about something that's so emotive, there can be some reticence around that. So one of the things we did was made sure that people felt comfortable, and that's from a few perspectives. So the first is from the perspective of our senior leaders who are going to be on the call and talking about some of their experiences. So before the calls, we had briefings with those people so that they could feel comfortable going into it. They had the opportunity to ask questions. You know, how are you going to approach it if this happens? What shall we say if somebody, you know, if somebody shares a view that is perhaps uncomfortable? So we had those conversations. We also had conversations with site managers to address their concerns, and we put out an all user email inviting people, explaining what it was going to be like, and also there was a central email inbox contact that they could, you know, talk to if they had any queries or concerns about the process or how it would work or anything like that. And we did get some people asking about them before they signed up.
Okay. And have you kept that kind of channel open?
Yeah, I think we established that channel quite early on. So this was something that you can contact about mental health, you know, wellbeing, any of the volunteering or engagement initiatives we do. So it's always been open. It's just saying that, you know, this is the specific place that you go to for the open forums and any concerns as well. So I think people were used to contacting that, but I think so there was a certain level of trust there. But I think, you know, adding into that contact into the open forums was very beneficial as well for people.
So what did you both find, what did you notice about the kinds of conversations that then began to gather momentum?
The main conversations, it was very different per call. I think it depended on who was on there and what questions they were asking. There was some questions around why is maybe some words acceptable and what aren't. What is right now for the modern day. But more so it was, can we provide more opportunities for people to talk about this going forward? Can we share what actions we are going to do off the back of this? And I think that was the main focus of the questions. It was, what can we do as an organisation? Off the back of that, we looked at, okay, well, we need to refresh some of our diversity training. We've got a diversity and inclusion module that's been rolled out to all of our employees. But actually now, is there an opportunity to do a deeper dive into that diversity training to separate out into different characteristics? Do we have a diversity training that is on race and religion? Do we have one that's on for our LGBTQ plus community? So it's starting to look at different opportunities that we have within our business.
I mean, as you rightly pointed out, it's in general, what you're trying to work towards, and particularly in your new role, is you're trying to work away from any form of discrimination. So just thinking, I would imagine unconscious bias training plays quite a part in that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. We already have a lot of unconscious bias training built into our current diversity and inclusion training. So that has already been rolled out to all of our employees, and even new starters that join the organisation have to go through that training. It is mandatory for everyone. But it's just, it kind of shifts away from not only having some of that training, but actually what does that mean at Voltex as we continuously build on that diversity strategy? So where do you go for if we have our diversity committee? How do you raise something with our diversity and inclusion committee? How do I get onto more training if I want it? Is there an opportunity for me to speak up about some of my experiences with discrimination and what that meant to me and how that felt? Because I'd love to be able to share that with other employees so they can understand what I've been through too. And it's just giving people a clear path and gateway to be able to do that at Voltex.
Yeah, and that platform and voice. And Sarah, I'm just thinking from the engagement point of view. So for you to feel comfortable that you've created forums and channels that are doing what you'd intended in this kind of situation, from a measurement point of view, how did you feel it went, or it's been going?
The calls were really valuable for me in that they created connections. So we'd have, thinking of one specific instance where there was a conversation between a white middle-aged man, quite successful, and a young black woman. And he was saying, I almost don't feel entitled to comment. I don't feel entitled to speak on these calls because I haven't suffered discrimination. I'm a white man and I've been very lucky in my life, and I'm aware of the discrimination that women go through, that people of all protected characteristics go through. And I don't want to upset anybody, and I've got the best intentions, but I don't know how to approach this. But he was obviously very, very passionate about the topic and wanted to talk about it. And the young black woman said, it's enough that you want to learn. It's enough that you want to be educated and that you're willing to ask these questions. And he was like, but I don't know if that's offensive to ask these questions. I don't know, what I'm supposed to do. I want to make this better. I want to solve systematic racism, but I just don't know what to do. And she's saying it's enough just to ask. It's enough to be involved and to want to do better, because this is the start of it. This is the start of us making things better at Voltex. And how much bigger and better it can get is the exciting part, but this is the start of it. And that encapsulated it for me. We are starting that conversation, and where we go from here is the important bit. So it's not enough just to start the conversation and then, oh yes, we did that, calls, tick that box, great. We need to work with people on those connections, on what comes next. So from an engagement point of view, it's almost, in any other company, it'd be a start of a culture change. We're very lucky that, this is a process for us. But it's acknowledging from an engagement strategy perspective that it is going to take time. It's going to be years of work. But it's just exciting to be on the start of that. And then, metrics wise, it will be small goals over time. And then hopefully one day we can look back and say, look where we started and look how far we've come, and how much our people have fed into that. So absolutely, our people at all levels of hierarchy will be involved at every single stage, and that's what's going to be key to the success for this, I think.
Yeah, it's good to get the support, isn't it, from the leadership. And actually, I mean, that's a really powerful example that you gave there of the young lady saying that it's enough. And one question for either of you: is reverse mentoring then something that's part of the plan for the year ahead? So the whole idea of people from, let's say in BAME communities particularly, actually actively mentoring others like the gentleman that you were talking about, to say, this is the way to do it.
That is really interesting that you've just mentioned that. And I think the reason for it is, I think we've focused a lot on mentoring in the traditional sense. And we've focused on a lot of our speak up campaigns by giving our people a voice, so that we're not just talking about changes that have happened in history and, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, we know those stories, but actually, do we know the stories of the people that sit next to us? Do we know the stories of the people that, work in our cash sites, that help to run our business? And that's ultimately what we're trying to do with the speak up. I think in terms of the mentoring, that is something also that we would want to do, because why not? Why does mentoring always have to come top down? It
Exactly.
doesn't. Actually, it's bottom up. You know, we can all learn from each other, and it kind of goes back to what I always say around feedback. You know, let's stop telling people what they want to hear or what we think they want to hear, but let's provide them with that voice to be able to shape it themselves, and to be able to do reverse mentoring, which is, yes, definitely, we are looking at doing that this year. How do we do that successfully so our people can help to shape and build maybe even another Voltex value that kind of encapsulates, I can't even say that word, that covers everything that we stand for as an organisation.
Yeah, no, wonderful. I'm going to move us on to onto well-being broadly, and Sarah, really focusing on you know, your area really, or you know, I know that this is, you both work in this area, but these are a couple of questions for you particularly. So I know when we'd talked before that you in 2019 had instigated a program of having lots of mental health first aiders trained up throughout the business. And you know, I know that on the Voltex board, HSBC and Barclays are present and very very supportive and keen that that mental health and well-being is kept to the fore. I'm just wondering, really, you know, given that the other massive thing that's happened and that really dominates our lives since we spoke is the whole issue of the pandemic. So thinking about your employee assistance program, you know, all of the great work that you were doing on well-being, I know you'd been shortlisted for awards. What's been happening in practice since the pandemic's been going on, and how have your employees been coping?
Yeah, clearly it has been a very difficult time for everybody's mental well-being, hasn't it? I think we had a good response to the pandemic around well-being, in that we very quickly understood what the impact of that was going to be on our people. I think that is a benefit of us having, you know, really looked into it before and understood the people we've got, what their challenges are. So we understood where other companies were kind of perhaps looking at, you know, the logistics of things. We were thinking, actually, our people are going to be very negatively impacted by that on a well-being side, so let's make that as high a priority as everything else. So we were putting together new materials, things like new mindfulness documents, we put together a new anxiety workbook, which was specifically related to the challenges of the pandemic, you know, the fear and anxiety, the isolation, things like that. And we put that kind of front and centre on our COVID intranet page, so it was accessible to everybody. People were invited to share their experiences again through our Speak Up campaign, so that, you know, even if they didn't want their story publicly sharing, they had a channel to reach out to if they did need support, but they just didn't know where to start or where to go to. I think I'd be doing it a disservice if I said that well-being hasn't been affected or that we've managed it perfectly. I think, you know, everybody's going to have their issues, and what a time to be going through something as well. But I think the measures we've put in place have really helped people just know where to come to. You know, you've got your first aiders in sites, and they've reached out to people. Our people have got on the intranet first aiders page, we've got faces, so you can see exactly who is a first aider in your area that you can go to, all the contact details. And it's been about making sure that all those channels were so readily available, so that even if you just have an impulse of thinking, oh, I might talk to someone, it's right there in front of you. So you know, I don't know how everybody listening would feel, but I've felt over my history of mental health concerns, you might have that one split second where you think, oh, I do need help, but then you have a few months of denying it. So we're capturing that one split second to make sure someone is there to answer. when that person reaches out.
Yeah, and I think that's the good thing about that, is if you've got a kind of an inclusive culture where people do feel safe, then you know, that if they feel safe and comfortable enough to actually ask the question and reach out, then if that's what you've created for them, then that's brilliant.
Yeah. And obviously, you know, the employee assistance line is always there as well. So that's a familiar tool that's always been there and was throughout the pandemic. So if they've wanted to go through that line as well, our calls to that have increased as well. So
oh, yeah, I can well imagine. Well, just thinking of another area that's very close to your heart, I know, volunteering. So, and as we know, if we think about things like the 5 ways to well-being, volunteering or giving back or helping others is a key facet of well-being. And I guess also for a large organization like yourselves and others like you, where, you know, I guess within any community in which you operate, and I think you've got around about 11 or so sites, I think, around the country, it's that sense of responsibility to those communities whose areas you operate in. So just thinking, what has been the common theme, the focus? How have you utilised volunteering as part of the well-being experience through the pandemic?
Yeah, it's been really interesting actually. So our volunteering strategy, we do put events in place, but mostly it's driven through our people. So they'll come to us and tell us what they want to do. So one of the things that has come out of our sites is someone in our Washington site. He has his own, what do you call them now?
3D printer.
That's it. 3D printer. I was going to go plastic printer. No. So he started to print. He was in isolation because he was extremely vulnerable. So he couldn't work at that time. But he used his time off to print PPE for local carers, NHS. And I think in total he spent about 900 hours printing these this PPE, because at that time it was a time when they couldn't get the PPE and it was very, you know, it was really worrying, wasn't it, at that time? So yes, he was printing that. So he was using his hours at home just completely focused on doing something for the greater good, really, I suppose is the way you could put it. And he got a lot out of that, I know, from his own well-being perspective. It gave him a sense of purpose. It was helping his local community. He could see how he fit into the bigger picture, and he was so proud of that. And we got to share that internally, and you know, it triggered other people to start doing things like sewing masks and things like that.
Yeah, actually, well, that's lovely, isn't it, to have done that? And really, it does make you think what a funny year it's been, in the sense of some aspects of it seems so long ago, you know, that first part of the pandemic, as you said, when, you know, thinking now that at least PPE is a bit more available, and it's not quite the issue I mean, obviously there's still work to be done, but it's not quite the issue that it was earlier in the year, and how big an issue. In fact, it's funny just sort of recalling that from what you've said. What about food banks and things like that? Have the employees sort of been indicating that that's been an area where they've wanted to support?
Food banks is something that we do for Christmas anyway. So it's something that our people are familiar with, and a really easy way to help, I think it's seen as, for us. So yeah, whilst our ethos is really that we don't want to, we want our people to work hard for the causes they care about most.
Yes, makes sense.
So where there's been food banks contributions, then that's been entirely from our people. So I'm afraid we can't take any credit for that. But yes, they will always contribute and let us know that they've been doing that, so that we can share those good news stories and encourage others to do the same.
Yeah, then that's brilliant, isn't it? Because as you say, that just reminds people about the importance of it. And actually, it's something you do at Christmas, if we think about the recent progress made in supporting schools and children on free meals, and families, you know, experiencing difficulties with getting access to food, which is just shocking, really, in this day and age. And thinking about, I know the government's just recently pledged support for the holiday period, because where you know, I think the furlough system will go into the new year, and where people are in difficult positions like that, to be worrying about, you know, how they're going to feed themselves, how they're going to get through Christmas. I think it's great that you have something that you offer around that time. It's cold, it's bleak out, and then you've got the pandemic on top of it. It's a really worrying time for people in that situation, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I think when we think about well-being, we tend to, we've touched a lot here on the mental well-being of our employees, but we've spent a lot of time over the past, is it 9 months now that this has been happening? 8-9 months, of also looking at what the physical and financial well-being is of our employees.
Yes.
So if we want to talk about well-being, actually we have to think about it all, don't we? So the physical side, very early on for Voltex, we made sure that we had those processes really in place. We were, you know, keeping a track of those government updates, those daily updates that were happening back in March, April, May time, and trying to not only just preempt what was going to happen, but also try and go above and beyond that to make sure that we had the safety of our employees being paramount. That was our, you know, first and foremost objective, of making sure that our employees were safe. But not only that, did we want to make sure that our financial well-being was well looked after of our employees. So when we talk about that, since the pandemic hit, obviously there has been a huge impact on our business and people spending cash, particularly back in March, April, May time. A lot of places were obviously refusing cash, or advising not to use cash and use card and contactless. So there was a huge impact to our business and the volumes that we saw. So in order to kind of reduce the number of people that we had in to support the decreased volume levels, but also make sure that we had enough people in to manage that and keep that social distancing in place, was quite tricky and a really big job for our employees to do. We did so. We've still got our employees on a 2-week on, 2-week off working pattern, which has been in place since early this year. But we haven't changed their pay at all. So we've had them on full pay since they've been on a 2-week on, 2-week off. And that is really important for us to note, because during this time, we also had some external surveys done by Best Companies. And they came in and looked at what we'd done during the pandemic, how we'd reacted to COVID, and what our employees thought of it. So we got measured at that point as an outstanding level of engagement, as a 2-star, which is fantastic. We were so pleased. But actually, in terms of the well-being side, we were 5 percentage points ahead of a 3-star company in well-being. So that was amazing for us, because we sometimes think that we're doing the right thing, and we think that it's being well received and our employees are telling us stuff, and sometimes no news is good news. But actually this provided an opportunity where our employees could say whatever they wanted to say about how we'd handled you know, the pandemic and how we'd reacted to COVID and what we'd done as an organisation. And actually that speaks for itself now. That's something totally independent. And to have that is a real testament to what the operations teams and what the rest of the HR team have done to be able to build something so great in a time of such uncertainty.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's just outstanding. That's incredibly impressive to have been able to achieve that through this really difficult time. I think that that brings us to a good high point, I think, to stop our interview. So I just wanted to say thank you to both of you for your time and taking the time out to join us today. And yeah, just keep it up. It sounds brilliant. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Lovely to speak to you.
Lovely to speak to you too.